Hey Bible lovers, I'm Tim Nichols and I'm here to bring you your Nichols Worth, and today we're going to be featuring why so many translations. Why do we have so many English translations of the Bible? Well, there's a few reasons for that. Number one reason would be your textual source, okay, because back in the 1500s when the King James and the Geneva and the kind of these groups right here, the King James, the Geneva, the Matthew's Bible, the William Tyndale, the only text that was available was either the Latin Vulgate or Erasmus text, where he compiled kind of all the manuscripts together to make one complete Greek manuscript known as the Textus Receptus. So that was really the only option at the time. But then later on, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. They found Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus, and all sorts of different manuscripts that dated older than Erasmus. So they thought, wait a minute, we need to use these as critical text in order to be able to compare so that we can get a more accurate translation based on the older manuscripts. So that's where some of these new translations came onto the scene. Then you have translation philosophy. Do we want a direct word for word, or do we want a more of a paraphrase, or do we want something that's kind of literal, but it doesn't say the exact same thing because it doesn't translate the same way? There are words in the Hebrew, there are words in the Greek, there are different things, they just don't translate directly into English. So they'll use like an essentially literal approach, or they'll use a dynamic equivalent approach, or they'll use an optimal equivalence approach like the CSB. So that's another reason why we have so many translations, is because, well, we found more manuscripts, and they want to have the most accurate, up-to-date languages. Another thing that causes us to have more translations is, unfortunately, there is going to be theological bias. Now, several of your translations are going to reflect that theological bias in some ways, but they do have translation committees that do hold them accountable. So I think that any of these translations here, you're going to be able to trust. Now, I'm going to show you the ones that I have. I have the Douay-Rheims, I have the CSB, I have the NIV, the NASB 77. This is the complete Jewish translation, which is actually a paraphrase of the JPS in the Old Testament, but it is a new translation in the New Testament to be less anti-Semitic. This is the King James, which is a classic translation. NLT, this is more of a closer to the line of the paraphrase, but it is still a translation. And the ESV, which is closer to word for word. NASB, which has gotten a little more dynamic in the 2020 update, which is what this is. The NET. Then we have the New Revised Standard Version, which is more of an ecumenical translation. Then we have the New King James, of course the NASB 95, and then of course we have the JPS. And these are from the 1500s. You have the Matthew's Bible, the Geneva Bible, and the William Tyndale New Testament. Now, most of the Bibles from the pre-1600s period are going to be based off the Textus Receptus from Erasmus. But some of them, for example, the Douay-Rheims, are going to be based off the Latin Vulgate by Jerome. Now, there's been arguments about the Latin Vulgate and whether or not it's corrupted and whether or not it makes mistakes, and it does say that Moses had horns, which definitely is a mistranslation of a word when he had the veil on, so that is kind of strange. So, and also the big argument is, should the Apocrypha be included, or also known as the Deuterocanon? It is not included in the Masoretic, which this is based off of. And most of your Old Testaments are based off the Masoretic, unless you have like the Orthodox Study Bible, which is based off the Septuagint. So there's a lot of factors that go into translating something into English, to include its textual source, to include its translation philosophy, and to include the theological basis in which the Bible is being catered to. So that does lend to some problems, because the Bible should shape the culture. The culture should not shape the Bible. However, in every translation I've read, here's where I'm going to encourage you. Every translation, I've never seen any difference that is so major that it makes the translation useless. I think that every English translation complements each other very well, and I believe they are all extremely useful, even all the way down to the NLT, which is not quite a paraphrase, but it's definitely moving that direction. There have been many times I have been stuck on a more formal or word-for-word translation, and I go to this and it gives me the clarity that I need. I tell you, the one I think that has the perfect balance is the CSB. Now, this is not to knock any of these amazing translations. The NET, all of them are fantastic. I think I'm on my 14th translation that I've read, and again, I've never seen anything major that stands out. What about the missing text? Maybe I'll cover that in a different video because I don't have time, but I do know that some of the critical apparatuses seem to be having some texts that don't exist, that do exist in the Textus Receptus, which has caused a big uproar and a big controversy. So anyway, why so many translations? Well, because the English language is updated. The English language changes over time, and sometimes they need to update it. So there's my thoughts on this matter. Keep calm. Jesus on. This is your Nicholsworth.